Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Welcome back to the Arunachala Ashrama. So now Swami Ishwarananda of Chinmaya Mission is going to speak on the missing ego. I like to say a few words about Swamiji. He was inspired by Puja Swami Chinmayananda under the guidance of Puja Swami Brahmananda from Bangalore. Swami Ishwarananda left his software profession and joined Sandipani Sadhanalaya in Mumbai, India in 1991. Upon completing his training, he served as a brahmachari in Chinmaya Mission, Bangalore, and Chinmaya Mission, Calcutta in India. In 1995, he was posted at Chinmaya Mission, Southern California. In 2000, he received the Sannyasa Diksha from Puja Swamiji Tejomayananji. Swami Ishwarananji resided in Mumbai, India between 2002 and 2004 as Acharya of the 12th Vedanta course for Brahmacharis at Sandipani Sadhanalaya. Swamiji is a dynamic speaker and has given talks on Vedanta, stress and mind management techniques and related topics. His clarity in Vedanta is apparent in his talks as he presents with ease, humor and wit complex philosophical subjects. He has also authored two highly acclaimed books, Conscious Living and Silent Search. Swamiji currently resides in Los Angeles, California, and he heads the Los Angeles Chinmaya Mission and probably the West. I request Puja Swamiji to speak about, today he'll be speaking on missing ego. Hari Om Swamiji.
Antaryascha bahirvidudatimiram jyotirmayam shashvatam sthanam prapya virajate vinamatam ajnanamunmulayan pashyan vishwamapidamullasatiyo Vishwasya pare paraha tasmai Shri Ramanaya loka gurave shokasya hantre namaha. Shri Ramanaya namaha. Dear friends, I am happy to share my thoughts on the given subject. Thanks for the nice introduction. The topic was stated as missing ego. Actually, it is misplaced ego. Can I have the slides, please? Okay, thanks. I will tell you when to change. Me, misplaced ego. Sri Ramana Maharshi once asked, "Who are you apart from me that presume to serve me?" I'm sure all of you have gone through many writings that are related to Sri Ramana Maharshi's teachings. Also, many of the people, I'm sure many of you have read talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. In all his various writings, either he himself composed or those who wrote about him based upon what he taught, in all those things we clearly see he never distinguishes the individual self different from the Supreme Self. The sadhana, according to Sri Maharshi, is dissolving the ego, who is an intruder. But what is the nature of this ego? This is what we are going to see in this presentation. Next. Me, the misplaced ego. A great saint in Tamil Nadu, Nammalvar, he says, I was in a maze sticking to the I and mine. I wandered without knowing myself. On realizing myself, I understand that I myself am you, and that mine, whatever I possess, is only you. This is pure Advaita. Though he took the path of devotion, but the end result is only the realization of the oneness. For Sri Ramana Maharshi always held that view that surrender is none other than recognition of the false I as false. In that recognition of the false nature of the impermanent I, the true self by itself shines forth. Next. To say that one is apart from the primal source is itself is a pretension. To add that one divested of the ego becomes pure and yet retains individuality only to enjoy or serve the Supreme is a deceitful stratagem. His own words. It is not correct to say that I, having dissolved my ego, become a servant of God. It is amounts to say that a river having merged in the ocean starts to become a servant of the ocean, a part of the ocean, a wave of the ocean, a bubble of the ocean. There is no I. Even before it merged, actually there is no I. The I, the ego, being a phantom entity, to hold on to that false and believing oneself to be different from the Supreme Source is the bondage. Next. The me is the self, and it is no different from the self that is residing in all. This is not only his words. In Gita, he held one particular verse as the most important verse of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavan Krishna says in Gita, Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarvabhutashaya Stitaha Aham Adischa Madhyamcha Bhutanam Anta Evacha. Next. O Arjun, I am the self, seated in the heart of all beings. Chapter 10, verse 20. This stanza shows that the Lord is the Atman of all beings. He is the very soul. The usage of the word soul, he had many times had mentioned in his writings or in his talks, that the soul is a misnomer. There is nothing called an individual entity called soul. The soul is another reference to the self, which is having an apparent identification with the not self. Next. So what is the birth of this ego, which is separating us temporarily from our real self? One reality is the self from whom has sprung the ego, which contains within itself the seeds of predispositions acquired in previous births, known as vasanas. The self itself is identifying with the predispositions has taken the form of an ego. That's why I said misplaced ego. The ego is none other than the expression of the very same self associated with the impurities carried on by us for a long time. Next. The self illumines the ego, the predispositions, and also the gross senses, whereupon the predispositions appear to the senses to have materialized as the universe and become perceptible to the ego, the reflection of the self. This is to say that through the conditioned nature of itself, it identified with the matter vestures called body, mind, senses, etc. And again, through those, the world of things and beings. The original source is the self, and it itself illumines itself in a conditioned manner as the body, as the mind, as the senses, as the objects. Next. The ego identifies itself with the body and so loses sight of the self. And the result of this inadvertence is dark ignorance and the misery of the present life. Where is that mistake that we have done? Losing sight of the real one. Self-forgetfulness. The fact of the ego rising from the self and forgetting it is the birth. What is called birth? Forgetting oneself. Next. The birth of the individual has killed the mother. Very strong words he has used. The birth has killed the mother. The present desire to regain one's mother is in reality the desire to regain the self, which is the same as realizing oneself or the death of the ego. This is the surrender unto the mother, so she may live eternally. This is exactly what is considered as the method in the path of devotion. Lose yourself at the feet of the Lord, you will be reborn as the self. Or in the path of knowledge, where they say, where you overcome the influence of the thoughts or transcend the thoughts and rediscover yourself. At the present moment, we are dealing with false I. And upon realizing its false nature, we become real I. Veshahanataha swatma darshanam, isha darshanam, swatma rupataha. Isha darshanam, swatma rupataha, swatma rupat. It is one's own nature, that is what is rediscovered. It is, we are never away from our own self. And when we come to think of it as something other than oneself, Upanishad also points out that yadeha amutra tadeva tad anviha. Yadeva amutra, that which is considered to be there far away from you, that alone is here, you as you. Tat tvam asi. Tat tvameva tat. These are all, when we do not understand the import of it, Tat, the word used tat as something different in time, in space, and all the various sadhanas are apparently practiced by individuals considering that moksha or the state of realization is something far away from us, and I have to reach that somewhere, sometime, in some way. Sri Ramana Maharshi points out there is nothing called anything away from you. If it is away from you, then you can never be that. It is not like a mortal being becoming immortal. A mortal being discovering his own immortality. It is like our Swami Chinmaya used to say, the distance between you and the pure self is the distance between the pot and the mud, the snake and the rope, the waves and the ocean. What is the distance between a wave and the ocean? What is the difference between or distance between the mud and the mud pot? What is the distance between the thread and the cloth? So is the distance between the self and you. The misconception that I am different, the misunderstanding that I am away, this misunderstanding has to go. And that is sadhana. Next. So where and what is the reason why we are not presently able to recognize and establish ourselves in the higher self? Memory. The ego is the same in the state of waking, dream, and deep sleep. In all the three states, it's the same. Next. The ego, identified with the waking state of the mind, identifies with the body, mind, senses, and retains the memories related to it and recollects it. The same ego, identified as a dreamer with the mind which is temporarily present there and remembers the temporary experience that it goes through. In the state of deep sleep, again identified with the absence of all of them, identified with the blissful ignorance in the absence of all of them, retains the memory that I slept. It is a memory that the ego maintains that makes you a waker. It is a memory that ego maintains that makes you a dreamer. It is a memory that ego maintains that is making you remember that you slept. Ego is memory. Next. Ahankarasya vijñeyaha tadatmena hi jayate. Identification is what makes the ego strong. In sleep, there is no such activity, and objects and world do not exist for us in sleep. Hence, the reality of the world may be created by the ego by its act of emergence from the sleep, and that the reality may be swallowed up or disappear by the soul resuming its nature in sleep. If the memory is understood to be the cause of us to even have a desire to experience things. When I had something yesterday which is tasty, pleasant experience, an ice cream, let us say, or a coffee, let us say, or some other thing. Today I want to have that again. Who is asking this? Me. Who is this me? Memory. Who is seeking the experience again and again? The ego that is able to access the memory of the yesterday's experience is trying to repeat itself by experiencing it again. Now this ego, next, the extension of its memory is very interesting to know. Experience is not possible without simultaneous knowledge. Sri Ramana Maharshi maintains here, saying, continue. Perception of an object without related memory does not lead to experience. Association with the memory is the function of the ego. An object cannot be known as is without the reference to it in a memory. So when the self associated with the ego, the knowledge is objective and relative. Next. The bliss of sleep is but a concept, relative knowledge, though subtle. Devoid of the ego, the knowledge is absolute. So there are two things we need to understand: the relative experience and the absolute experience. Relative experience is a concept. What is a concept? It is a relative temporary understanding of a thing. A concept is a temporary perception of a thing. It can constantly change. My concept about something is relative in the sense to the given available information, I have a concept. Tomorrow, the information that is available has changed, my concept also will change. So the experience that I have of any object is related to available information. A child which is growing up is given a certain kind of information based upon which the child knows. Let us say a child is learning math in the school. How much does it know, or how much it can recall, or how much it can calculate? It depends upon how much of mathematical formulas are given to the child. Beyond that, it cannot know or understand. As the information, so will be our perception. As the memory, so will be the experience. Therefore, ego is an extension of the memory. Experience is an extension of the memory. Now, interesting point is here, we don't have any memory of the self. We have memory about the body, about the mind, about thoughts, about emotions, about feelings, about that and this. But there is no memory of the self. Therefore, ego cannot enter into that area. Who are you when I ask you? You bring about all information about you from the day you're born till today. I'm born of so and so. I'm born in that family. I have got this education. I grew up in this place. This is my name. This is my wife. This is my children. This is my job. This is my office, a brother, sister, whatever, or the name, or this is my race. This is my religion. All that you can relate. Why? Memories. Remove all that. Who are you? Now, I don't have a reference point. When you ask as a self, as a pure self, what is your reference point? What is the reference you have? I have no reference, no memory of it. Just because you don't have the memory of the self, are you not the self? In the state of deep meditation or samadhi, self-absorption, in the nirvikalpa samadhi sthiti, where there is no particular experience of mind or the feelings or emotion or an object taking place, there is no recollection of what it is in the way people can speak to others. If I had a samadhi experience, I am unable to explain to you what it is because there is no memory of it. Please understand when I use the word memory. Ego has no access to that point. Because unless there is absence of ego, I cannot reach there. Therefore, next. The inherent nature of the self is bliss, experience of which is not a concept or a relative knowledge. Next. The seeing an object is not possible with the light illuminating it. But to see the light itself, nothing is necessary. It's what it is said in Tejobindu Upanishad. Nimishardham na tishtanti vrittim brahmamayim vina. Yata tishtanti brahmadhyaha sanagadhyaha shukadyaha. Tishtanti it is. Tishtanti. Next. Saints do not remain without abiding in Brahman even for half a moment, just as Brahma, Sanat Kumaras, and Shuka, etc. Meaning, abidance in the self is not an experience like tasting something, eating something, seeing something, smelling something, remembering something. And therefore, do we need to remember the self? Self is not a memory. That's why in Saddarshan first verse itself what he says, Tasya smridihi tasya dridaiva nishta. Smridihi nishta. Remembrance is abidance. Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi very clearly said, in an abiding state, there is no word, there is no utterance, there is no speech, there is no explanation. Because there is no access to it as a particular experience. And just like any object I see, it is nothing but the light reflected on it. Consciousness reflected on the object is what becomes an experience to me. Just like the light does not need another light for it to express or know to be known. Yata deepo na anya deepa icha. Similarly, realization of the self is not a particular experience. Sri Ramana Maharshi always maintained that it is not a state of some mental state of bliss or mental state of peace. No. Again, it becomes a vritti. It becomes a thought. It becomes a mode of the mind. It is realization or samadhi avastha is not a mode of the mind. Having reached which there is no return. Yadgatva na nivartante. Having reached to it, there is no question of return. What does it mean? No return means, meaning there is no individual there to refer to it as this is what I experienced. If somebody says self is experienced by me in this way, he has not or she has not. When our own Pujya Swami Chinmaya was asked this question, are you realized? He said, no, I'm waiting for you. Meaning, I cannot say I know it because it is not something can be spoken with reference to some set of experiences. In Kenopanishad also it is said, it is not I do not know, not that I know. Those who know what I'm saying knows. Those who do not know what I'm saying, they do not know. Because for the known, for the one who thinks he knows not. For the one who knows that it cannot be known, knows. It is not to confuse you. But that is what it is. Maunena majjan, sunk in that complete silence. Next. It is said in Kaivalya Navanitam, which Sri Ramana Maharshi also referred in his talks, there are 7 states of ego's identification. First one is called Bija Jagrata. Soon after waking from sleep, one does not have an immediate awareness of the body. There is only a simple I, like the sprout from the seed. As soon as you wake up, that is called Bija Jagrata. Jagrat, waking, is the awareness of the body takes place along with awareness of the time and space where you are sitting, how long you slept, and you start thinking about it. That's called Jagrat. Second, third. Mahajagrat, full awareness of the waking along with the restlessness of the mind, and where the anger, lust, passion, greed, jealousy, and everything starts to manifest. All the vasanas also. Then fourth one is called Jagrat Swapna, thinking about the known and unknown and keeping the mind occupied with the previous memories. This is called Jagrat Swapna, waking dream. Then Swapna, the dreaming about those which are experienced and not experienced in a state of withdrawal from the world of object that we go through every day, the dream state. Then that's called Swapna Jagrat. In the dream state, you are thinking that you are awake, recollecting all those and which one has seen before and experiencing them as real. That is called Swapna Jagrat. And finally, Sushupti, dreamless deep sleep state where one is completely withdrawn and from the senses and the mind. So ego goes through all these various states. This is called Sapta Ajnana Bhumi, 7 states of ignorances. And so when ego goes through, and it gathers all these memories into itself, and the ego's nature is to continuously dwell upon this memory. Given some people say, Swamiji, I am unable to meditate. Why? So many things are coming to my mind. Where is it coming from? What is the source? Outside something? Continuous engagement in the memories of the past or whatever is experienced either in the waking or dream. We are so busy with that. And that is the reason why we are incapable of coming out of this whirlpool of the ego's memory. In the path of devotion, therefore, they give us a substitute. Think about God. Take his name. Look at his form. Do worship. Do alankara. Take the nama japa. Sing bhajans. What is that? It is to come out of this whirlpool of memories associated with me and mine. I and me. To come out of this whirlpool, come out of this continuous cycle of remembering, recollecting, reliving, remembering, recollecting, reliving, remembering, reliving. So it goes on and on. To come out of this vicious circle, they say, take a step outside. It is like having worked for so many months, I want to take a vacation to go to some place of relaxation. What is that? To come out of your routine, to relax, to mind us to get out of that regular routine of things. Don't we do it? Sadhana is vacation from bondage. But what happens is we become addicted to a sadhana, addicted to the vacation. So next few months again we work hard only to take a vacation. Sadhana should not be considered as an escape route or escape from the preoccupation of the mind. It should become a release and relief for good. It should not be a short-time escape. Self-inquiry is the highest and most powerful and direct method. Question the reality of that ego. Question the reality of your memories. My memory about a person depends upon what I experienced with that person. And what I experienced is also decided by the tools or equipments with which I experienced. My body, my mind, my senses. And according to the quality of the equipment, so will be the quality of experience. And the nature of the equipments being limited, the experience that I have experienced is also limited. And therefore, ego engages and establishes itself in the limited experiences of life, and it never releases itself to enter into the vast field of unconditioned bliss of the self. It always remains conditioned to limited experience of happiness and dies, and again reborn to do the same thing. Next. So the way to come out of it is also given by Sri Ramana Maharshi, how the self can be known or realized. The subject is aware of the object. There must be a unity underlying of these, which arises the ego. The ego is of the nature of Chit, the intelligent. The insentient object is only a negation of Chit. Therefore, the underlying essence is akin to the subject and not the object. Please be careful here. Subject is intelligence, and object is absence of that. It's not another existence. It is like, can there be light and darkness in the same place? But is it not true? With the same eyes, you can see the light also and darkness. Darkness has no independent existence. In the same way, objects do not have independent existence. They are related to the subject. In the absence of subject, there cannot be an object. But in the absence of object, there can be subject. Seeking the subject until the object disappears, the subject will become subtler and subtler until the absolute subject is achieved or alone survives. This process is called Drishya Vilaya, disappearance of the objective world. In the seat of meditation, a person who is sitting and watching one's own thought must understand the thought as an object, a thing that is perceived, known, realized, or felt, understood, known. And when thus I even look at my own thought as an object and not related to me, it is only a temporary occupation of the mind. I see the thought as arising and falling down. When I do not continue to engage in the thought, it does not remain in the same way. It disappears. And wait for it to disappear. Why should the object be eliminated? Cannot the truth be realized even keeping the object as it is? No. Elimination of object means elimination of separate identities of the subject and object. The object is unreal, including the ego. Eliminating the unreal, the reality survives. When a rope is mistaken as a snake, it is enough to remove the erroneous perception of the snake for the truth to be revealed. Without such elimination, the truth will remain, it will not dawn. Continue. When and how the disappearance of the objective world to be effected? It is complete when the relative subject, namely the mind, is eliminated. The mind is the creator of the subject and the object and is the cause of the dualistic idea. Therefore, it is the cause of the wrong notion of the limited self and the misery consequent to such erroneous state. The division is created as though subject is different from the object, and subject is the seer, object is the seen, subject is the enjoyer, object is the enjoyed, subject is the experiencer, object is the experienced. In this way, the division is created and mind maintains that. When both are seen to be false, object and the relative subject, It is like watching a movie on a screen, and the screen is a substratum on which this movie is being projected. Without the screen, there cannot be movie. Without the movie, the screen can remain. But the screen itself is a relative entity, in the sense, the mind which is having its power to entertain thoughts or maintain thoughts itself is mere misconceived ego, a misconceived self, apparent self, conditioned self. That is the reason why when we withdraw from the state of waking to the dream, mind continues to be. No object is there, still the mind is there. The mind and its a nature of associating itself with the memory called ego continue to be present in the state of dream, and both of them withdraw in the state of sleep, only to wake up to claim I had a nice sleep. Who is saying? The mind. How does it know? It has come to a concept. In the absence of all things, nothing to disturb me, nothing to trouble me, I should have had only joy. But again, that should not be misconstrued as the nature of the self. Next. So the method that is explained by Ramana Maharshi is, if we look at the self as the ego, when we become the ego, if we look at it as a mind, it becomes the mind. If we look at it as a body, it becomes a body. It is the thought that which builds up the sheath in so many ways. The shadow on the water was found to be shaking. Can anyone stop the shaking of the shadow? If it should cease to shake, you should notice that the water is but only the light. Similarly, to take no notice of the ego and its activities, but to see only the light behind. Continue. The ego is I thought, the true I is the self. In a reflected water, there is light, and the light is shaking. Is the light shaking, or the water is shaking? The self, unconditioned, pure self, does not undergo any change, any experience, whether waking, dream, or deep sleep. Neither the happiness of the waking, nor the tragedies of the dream, nor the so-called bliss of the sleep belong to the self. It all belongs to the ego. It all belongs to the memories. It all belongs to the presence and absence of thoughts. So in the absence of the objects in the deep sleep state, the subject apparently thinks that it is this bliss. This is the bliss of the self, which is also only a temporary memory conceptualized by the ego as a release. We are happy about it, nothing wrong, but that is not the nature of the self. Next. Yogi Ramaya asked Maharshi about contemplation. He taught him as follows. When a man dies, the funeral pyre is prepared and the body is laid flat on the pyre. The pyre is lit, the skin is burnt, then the flesh and then the bones until the whole body falls to ashes. What remains thereafter? Mind. The question rises, how many are there in the body? One or two? If two, why do people say I and not we? There is therefore only one. Where is it born, or what is its nature? Inquiring thus, the mind also disappears. Then what remains over is seen to be I. The next question is, who am I? The self alone. That is contemplation. This is how I did it. By the process of attachment, by this process, attachment to the body is also destroyed. The ego vanishes, the self alone shines. Next. The sea is not aware of this. Very important. The sea is not aware of its wave. Similarly, the self is not aware of the ego. Ego has forgotten the self. The self has no awareness of the ego. It is very, very strange. See, if I have forgotten someone, how do I know I have forgotten him or her until somebody tells me that you forgot? If I have forgotten you completely and you are standing in front of me, would I remember that I forgot you? If I remember that I have forgotten you, then I will try to know you. If I have even not remember that I forgot you, will there be any attempt at all? This is where the Guru, the Shastra, the scriptures come in play. They come to say, you don't even know what you have forgotten. Shravanam, listening is important. Through Shravanam, through listening, what we have forgotten is being reintroduced. Through Mananam, we come closer to remembering, recognizing, reflecting upon what we have forgotten. In Nididhyasan or meditation, we re-establish our connection with what is forgotten. In the state of Samadhi, we go back to the source and forget the ego, which is temporarily we have taken to be ourselves. That is what is called misplaced ego. See, Vedanta sadhana is know that you have forgotten, know what you have forgotten, reflect upon that, reconnect, establish. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please direct it to me, and otherwise we'll conclude.
So yeah, I guess there's no question. So thank you, Swamiji. That was wonderful. We're grateful to you for graciously addressing us on this milestone 125th anniversary of Bhagavan's advent at the Holy Hill Arunachala. We are fortunate. Thank you for bringing our focus to Bhagavan's core teaching of ignoring the misplaced ego and only seeing the light behind. Your explanation of Bhagavan's profound message in simple language and with refreshing lightness has left us inspired to not squander this precious birth and to put to practice Bhagavan's direct teaching of self-inquiry. Thank you again. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, Swamiji. I'm sorry I was a few seconds late. There were two questions. Sorry, Sunita. There were two questions from the devotees.
Please.
Yeah, I will read it to you, Swamiji. Hari Om. Swamiji, thank you for your illuminating sharing. You have described the ego as a phantom entity. Yet to us, it seems entirely real. How can we dissolve the phantom, especially an unreal phantom?
Knowing its unreality itself is a dissolution. Knowing in the sense, as and when it appears, you recognize its false nature. It does not that when you know it, it doesn't appear. It will appear. But as and when it appears, give no reality to it. Okay, I will give you an example. Let us say I see a person doing something which I do not like. As soon as I recognize that I get an anger in my mind for the person doing what he's not supposed to do. The anger is an expression of the ego only. And as even the anger mood, angry thought comes, I know that this anger has no reality other than my liking in a particular way to do a job which he is not doing. So anger is not caused by him. Anger is caused by my insistence. This ego is insisting it this way. The moment I realize that it is the cause is not his action, the cause is my insistence, you lose every anger towards that person. I hope I made that point clear. So as and when the ego arises, do not blame the world for what is happening there. The source is within only. All the time it is we who have created that phantom entity, and that phantom entity is trying to take us for a ride. When you realize that, you don't blame the world. You do not fight with the world. You do not have a battle with the world. At that very moment, you dissolve it.
Thank you, Swamiji. The next question was, devoid of the ego, the knowledge is absolute, you have mentioned. In deep sleep, there is no ego. Does this imply that the deep sleep state in which we are not aware of anything, our body, the world, etc., is a state of absolute knowledge?
It is not the ego is absent in the sleep. The ego, like what we experience in the waking and dream, is not present in sleep. That is what the correct way to say. With respect to the world, we have no ego in the deep sleep. With respect to attachment to the objects, we have no ego in sleep. With respect to our own desires and wants and pursuits, there is no ego in sleep. But the ego continues to exist even in the deep sleep state to own up that state as I slept well.
Thank you, Swamiji. Third question, when you have mentioned to seek the subject, that the essence is akin to the subject, does the subject, the viewer, the enjoyer, here refer to the ego, the conditioned self? Question mark.
If you go a little deeper into that point, in Vedanta, what we call it as the reflection of consciousness is nothing but consciousness itself reflected on the intellect, which is what is making the ego's survival possible. The reflection of consciousness, it's called Chidabhasa, in the limited intellect, which has limited information and vasanas, having that reflected consciousness as its power, comes to identified with the body, mind, and intellect, etc., and individual, it acts as an individual. In Atma Bodha, Shankaracharya says, Atmana Satchidamshasya Buddhehe Vrittiriti Dvayam Sanyojya cha avivekena Janami iti pravartate. When you say I know, there are two things there, the subject I, which is a reflection of consciousness, and know, the ability to know about any object or an experience. This subject, which is a reflection of consciousness, cannot be without the pure consciousness. Though it acts like a pure consciousness, but it is not so. Just like the sunlight reflecting on a mirror behaves like the sunlight, but it is not. That is the nature of the subject having the same amount of intelligence like that of the Chit.
Thank you, Swamiji. One final question. The sea is not aware of its wave. Swamiji, are you saying that in the light of the self, there is no recognition of the ego or the personal self? If the loss of the personal self is the goal, why has creation sustained this ego, and that in such a powerful manner?
If I understand your question correctly, why there is ego, is it? Am I correct in my understanding?
Yes, Swamiji. Or I'll read it once more. The sea
Because
is
your voice is breaking up. I'm not able to clearly comprehend it.
the sea is not aware of its wave.
Oh, the sea is not aware of its waves. Okay.
Yeah. Swamiji, are you saying that in the light of the self, there is no recognition of the ego or the personal self?
Correct.
If the loss of the personal self is the goal, why has creation sustained this ego, and that in such a powerful manner?
It's a manifestation. It is not reality, right? When you say sustained the ego, what it means is that it is making it appear to be there. It is like asking, why should this rope continues to sustain the snake? Is the rope really sustaining the snake? Is really rope supporting the snake? Or rope is perceived as the snake? Who is seeing the snake? That's the question. Rope is not saying I'm the snake. Rope doesn't even have the concept of snake. Rope has never been the snake. Similarly, the waves are perceived by us. The limited form of the sea or the ocean is perceived by us. So the question is that the one who is asking, why am I asking? You are asking. You have to tell me that. It is like I'm seeing the snake instead of rope, and I ask my guru, why am I seeing the snake? The guru says, you are seeing the snake, and you are asking me. And the guru very patiently explains, because you are not seeing the rope, therefore you are seeing the snake. Right?
Yes,
In the absence of the perception of the snake's rope, there is a definite perception of the snake. In the absence of really knowing the self, there is a constant play of the ego. We are at the standpoint, it is like a dreamer who is dreaming and crying and shouting, and you, the one who is away from it, I mean, you are awake, and you are looking at him and waking him up and saying, why are you crying? He said, I'm crying because I'm being tortured. By whom? What is the dreamer's answer? You? I'm tortured by you. Who is torturing you? The waker is asking the dreamer. What is the answer of the dreamer? By me only. He has to admit. There is no entity that called another entity who is torturing me in the dream. So the waker says, wake up, you will not be tortured anymore. So why there is sustenance of that waves by the ocean? Ocean never sustains that. We are seeing it. The waker is not supporting the dream experience. The dreamer is. You ask the waker, why this dreamer is, why are you supporting the dream experience? He says, I'm not. If one is fully awake, he knows that the whole thing is false. Have I answered correctly, or am I answered according to your satisfaction?
Absolutely, Swamiji.
Okay. Thanks.
That was the last question, Swamiji. And Hari Om, thank you very much. It was such a nice and inspiring speech. And we hope to hear from you very much, Swamiji. And also, I have to tell everybody, when we asked for a little bit of personal information, Swami Ishwarananda sent me only 2 lines of information. We have to dig out more to make out his Purvashama and also a little bit how much he is involved with the Chinmaya mission. Thank you very much, Swamiji. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Sri
you.
Ramana Maharshi.